That brings me to our first guest. Ann Hambley is the founder and CEO of First Service Solutions and is understood to be one of the premier CMBS resolution specialists in the country. And she's resolved in excess of $25 billion in securitized loans. And that number will undoubtedly inflate after 2020. So I've referred clients to her and know many owners have hired her independently. And this is the fourth of her presentations I've been able to hear. So Ann, we appreciate you being here, and I'll go on and turn it over to you.
Thank you. Appreciate that, Robert. And just know real quickly that I've spent 35 years of my career in and running servicing shops, very heavy in CMBS from day one, and have had my firm for 15 years now. And all we do is help owners with CMBS debt. We happen to be very much in demand right now with everyone needing some relief on their CMBS loan. So first of all, on page 3 of the slides is just, I think most of you would know this already, but the difference in CMBS versus bank loans, and it's very pronounced right now during this coronavirus pandemic. If an owner has, 2 loans, one's CMBS, one's not, I've heard over and over they can pick up the phone and call their banker. I've even heard such nice stories as bankers calling borrowers and saying, don't worry about your next few payments, we'll work with you. Whereas in CMBS, that banker's gone and there is almost feels like no one to talk to. And so we'll talk about that, but that's the stark difference. I won't go through page 4 is a CMBS structure, and it looks complicated, and most of you will tune me out right now, but just know that a bunch of owners, that loans are pooled together for bonds are then issued, and bonds are, AAA down to unrated. The unrated bondholders appoint a special servicer, and those unrated bondholders are really all opportunistic, high-yielding funds, and they wind up controlling the entire CMBS industry. And there are about 10 of them in the industry controlling everything. So the important thing to know is not who is your master servicer, not necessarily who's your special servicer, but ultimately at the end of the day, the ones pulling the control levers are the controlling class representatives or the lowest rated bondholder in a pool. The number 5 is I go through the CMBS loans. The reason there's no banker, and the important thing to know about CMBS is the CMBS structure is in an IRS vehicle, and the IRS vehicle that these loans are put into, and I think personally they're kind of shoved in there. They don't really fit, but they're shoved in there. It's called a RMIC, a Real Estate Mortgage Investment Conduit. And the reason that's important, and you're probably all thinking, why do I care about that? But it will speak to the heart of what's going on here now. The whole point with the RMIC is for every dollar the borrower pays into the servicer, that whole dollar needs to go out to bondholders. There cannot be a taxation at the entity level, or a CMBS product would never work. So the ultimate goal of servicers is to make sure they're always keeping the RMIC tax laws in mind. And one of the worst things a servicer can do in a RMIC status is to modify a performing loan. So if you've got a performing loan, coronavirus hits, you're asking for relief, in essence, the servicer stands the chance of doing something wrong here and making the entire pool of bonds taxed. So understand where the servicers are coming from, and understand that they're highly restrictive on what they can do. Now, special servicers, different story, but the master servicers are always keeping this in mind. And this is what drives all of the servicers' decisions. Okay, so now let's talk about COVID-19, and I'm going to focus this, all on hospitality. And hospitality, of course, is the product that went off a cliff, right? So COVID-19 hit, and closures started happening middle of March, and we started having panicked owners calling immediately, inquiring about what to do with, should I make the payment in April? What do I do? There's so many, concerns. So Hospitality, of course, was hit the first, the hardest. You guys all know that yourself. And so they're the ones kind of leading the whole charge for COVID relief. So the approval process, and I got a little diagram here on page 7, but the master servicers, while a loan is in master servicing, they're governed again by these RMIC rules. So they're very, very, very restricted on what they can do. A master servicer so far has gotten comfortable with granting a 90-day or 3-month payment deferral, and that's about all they can grant. Anything beyond the 3 months does require the approval of the special servicer. And a special servicer, you can only get to a special servicer one of 2 ways. One way is you have to have missed 60 days of payments or 2 payments. So if you stop and think about when COVID-19 hit, middle of March, I had a number of, in fact, 20% of hotel owners that had CMBS debt did not make their payment for April, and about over 50% did not for May. So those that did not make the April payment, they're going to be 60 days delinquent coming up on their June payment. Those loans are in the process of being transferred to the special servicer, and that's where you have to be to get the real relief. Now, the only other way you can get to special servicing other than missing 2 payments is with the, I'm going to call it a threat or declaration of an imminent default, meaning I'm not in default yet, I didn't miss a payment yet, but I'm not going to continue to fund this shortfall absent some relief from you. So I'm telling you, although I'm not in default today, I will be in default. And so an imminent default is the other way you can get to special servicing. Now, the next page is visual in nature, and here's what it looks like as you're trying to get to the special servicer. Hopefully you see on your screen a whole bunch of traffic. And what it's like is you've got 5 special servicers who control, 90% of CMBS. And you've got probably, I don't know the number exactly, but you've probably got 10,000 at least borrowers trying to get in to see them. So there is a long wait, and that's why they're waiting for the 60 days delinquency to get you in there. But it's a long wait. It's frustrating. If you're an owner and you have no income coming in on your hotel and you need help, there's nothing more frustrating today that we're hearing about than the length of time it takes to even get someone to call you back. So that's the downside in it. Okay, so I've got a couple of things I want to cover now. The process up on the right, you'll see it, we already talked about, but the master servicers cannot grant the relief. They can only give you this 3-month deferral of payments. Special servicers are what it takes to get the relief, and you got to be 60 days delinquent or, imminently in danger of going into default. The most common relief granted so far is the one that you can get while you're in master servicing. No surprise, because that's the first stop along the way in the road. And what they can grant, again, is 3 months of deferral. You have to pay it back over the course of a year, typically in 2021. The fees, I put in here reasonable fees. What we're seeing, I'll verbally tell you, is about $10,000 for the approval. It's not always consistently that, but they're generally reasonable. And you can get waiver of triggers and covenants. So, these loan documents have all kinds of debt service coverage triggers. And the worst thing that could happen, I think, in my opinion, would be that an owner come out of pocket, keep the loan current, not ask for relief, and come June 30th, they send in their quarterly financials, and they're going to be now in a cash sweep because they'll have triggered all of the bad things you can in your documents, and it takes 6 months of recovery in order to get out of that. So it's not somewhere that you want to be. So you want a waiver of those triggers and covenants. Everyone asks about the government relief. What's available? What can help the CMBS owner? And unfortunately, there is no government relief right now that you can utilize or that you can take advantage of as an owner with CMBS debt. One of the things that's out there is, of course, the PPP, and the PPP is getting approved by the servicers across the board, but it does require approval. If you don't get the approval from the servicer, and this ultimately is not a grant, you don't use it in accordance with the regulations to make it a grant, then actually you're violating potentially your recourse carve-outs here by adding debt. So PPP, you got to get approval. The EIDL loans, all the SBA loans, anything with a loan name in its description is being denied across the board. And then there's, of course, this Main Street program that's available or coming out, and that will give a borrower 12 months of debt service for, I think, a 2-year, 2% interest rate. I don't know if that's widely available. I've not had anyone ask me for approval to do that. But so government relief is pretty much non-existent for hotel owners other than the PPP, which you do have to get approval for. Other things that I wanted to cover with you is on the last page, and then my presentation's done, and I'm happy to entertain questions or do whatever you'd like, Robert, but fees. So again, we talked about the reasonable fees that I think are being charged for the 3-month payment deferral. The fees for anything other than that, where you have to go to special servicer and you need longer period of time, those are not standard yet. We're getting feedback across the board, and know that those are negotiable. So it's not like you have to go in with your eyes closed and get hit over the head with a hammer, and it is what it is. They'll offer you fees, and you'll have to negotiate the fees. So there's nothing standard there. Let me tell you why some of the very first responses we heard when we're asking for the COVID relief was various versions. I jokingly told some people in my group that I think that some of the servicers created a drop-down menu to respond to borrowers, and the drop-down menu was no. I use various versions of this, but, definitely no, and of course not, ever, ever, So all the responses we were getting were various forms of denials to begin with, and the denials were because of one of the 3 reasons. Either the borrower took a lot of money out when they refinanced the loan in 1995, long time ago, or the sponsor or guarantor has a lot of money, their net worth is really high, so they don't need my relief. Or the third one was property performed really well last year, so why should I give you relief now? And of course, none of those things matter in these loans, and that shouldn't matter right now during this COVID crisis. You could kind of get past these, but the denial was meant, in my personal opinion, as a form of trying to push people away and have you try to figure out the solution as an owner on your own. Suck it up is what all the themes were. Suck it up. You go figure it out, owner. Don't come to me. Well, they were successful. Some owners said, okay, I'll go figure it out other ways. That's what they want. And then others, we say, look, we can't, right? We need your help. And then you continue the discussion. Question I get asked over and over and over is, should I make the payment? So I got a closed hotel, let's say, and I have no income coming in. Do I need to make the payment? On a webinar, if I had a one-off client call, I have an answer. On a webinar here, I'm going to be a little more careful, but your outcome and your end result is not different from anything I've seen, whether you come out of pocket and keep the payments current or you don't. Now, again, if you're looking for merely the 3-month of deferral of the payments, then by all means, you should probably keep the loan current and get that relief and move on with life. If you need more than 3 months, you're going to get the special servicer anyway. Remember, there's only 2 ways to get there. One is an actual default, and one is an imminent default. So it doesn't necessarily do a borrower good to come out of pocket and make those payments. We talked about the CCRs and the triggers. So I think with that, I will stop here. I've spent, I think, 15 minutes, which is about the objective. And Robert, I'll hand it back over to you to either take questions or to move on with your meeting accordingly.
Thanks, Ann. I appreciate it. And